Don't cry for me. Argentina was very much a hot topic, and Mark O'Hare, you called it, my friend. Oppose them often, oppose them early. Argentina, no good.
Yeah. I mean, we'll come to them when we talk about their game against Paraguay, because I don't think it's going to be a similar case in the next game at all. But to be honest, I actually saw a few positive signs in their performance. I think they were just outfought tactically, really. The game was more won in the coaching dugouts rather than on the pitch, I felt. But we'll come to it soon, because I don't think it's all bad news for Argentina. Although Colombia deserved to win us, which is good for our bank balance.
Also joined today with by Adam Chernoff. Adam, Chile, easy one. Qatar, Paraguay, tough one to swallow, that one.
Oh, the last 20 minutes were a little bit tough, but unfortunately no one was listening to the video, and we said as long as they don't give them space in midfield, Paraguay can win the match. And what do? Give them plenty of space in midfield. Qatar runs around and gets 2 late goals to break everyone's heart. But like you said, Chile made up a little bit for it as much as they could.
Absolutely. By the way, absolutely loving your backdrop today. If you're watching with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope, you can see the lovely blue sea. Where are we today, Adam?
Today we're in the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas.
It's a tough gig. Miami last week, Virgin Islands this week. It's not a bad old gig. Whatever you're doing, mate, I want to be on it. Let's have a look at the first match day, 2 games. We'll start with Bolivia, Peru, which is tonight on Tuesday. Big price here for Bolivia. Obviously, very disappointing. The first game against Brazil, 9.8. Peru, we've seen tons of money coming Peru, a 1.45. Bolivia getting 1.25 goal start on the Asian handicap, and the total is 2.25. Mr. Chernoff, I will start with you. You sent me in copy pretty early on this one. You sent through copy on Sunday night. The line, as you predicted, was moving. You predicted Peru minus, I was a 0.75, Adam, but it's 1.25 now. So I presume you're not going to plow in further.
Yeah, no, one of the things you want to look for when you're betting these international tournaments is usually prices for the second and third matches of the group stage will come out just before the first match starts. And that's really where you can find a lot of value, because a lot of people are just waiting to see what happens in the opening match, and then the prices will change based on what happens in that match. So even though Venezuela-Peru went 0-0, a lot of the market I thought was going to take to Peru and what they put forth. Certainly the case here. So much like Chile last week, where that market was non-existent by the time we got here to the video, same thing happening with Peru. But I still certainly value on the handicap, 0.75, 3/4 of a goal, getting a little pricey. But maybe you can find the -1 that's not so unreasonable. But certainly think this match sets up really well for them. Sort of the common thing that I don't really agree with in soccer betting is people will be able to analyze a match and say this team's going to get pinned back and this team's going to attack. And they immediately think that there's value on that team attacking, which isn't necessarily the case. That's how this match is going to set up. But I think the narrative goes a lot deeper than that when you examine what's going to happen on the field. Bolivia, they went with a 4-4-1-1 that was very rigid and very vanilla. It's a very easy system to learn. And it wasn't so surprising under Villegas that he was going to put forth something like that against Brazil, which was just pressure for the full 90 minutes. Going up against Peru, it's probably going to put forward the same thing. And when you get sort of this zone style that this implements, a couple things become really dependent. And that's two, that both strikers have to have a very good match in order to push the opponents back. But then also the central defenders become a little bit vulnerable. And even with all the bodies packed in the middle of the field, they can get sort of caught on their back foot. And when you match it up against Peru, rather than playing crosses in from the side relentlessly, which Bolivia can sort of sit back and defend, there's not much effort to do that. They certainly have the size. Peru goes with through balls right up the middle, and they have all this speed in the middle of the field, and they can take that right to Bolivia. And if you look at what happened against Brazil, Brazil initially in the first 20, 25 minutes, they were trying all of those crosses. They said, this isn't going to work. They made the adjustment at halftime. They came out, scored 3 goals, looked like a completely different match for the last 45 minutes. So I think this sets up really well for Peru. In all 3 games in the World Cup, the market really took to Peru. They bet them down consistently against really good opponents. Against Venezuela, they started 2.3, closed 2.1. So this is really the 5th game in a row where this same squad of 23 players, you watched the video last week, you know how much crossover there is from the World Cup squad of Peru to this match. This is really the 5th game in a row where Peru has taken on a lot of market interest. I certainly think finally we're going to see them play to their full potential against a weak opponent. and run up the score a bit in this one, as it's really going to shape up in this group as to who beats Bolivia the worst in order to get that second place finish.
Mark O'Hare, Peru were one of your kind of fancied outsiders at the beginning of the competition. Was there anything you saw there? Obviously, they drew 0-0 with Venezuela at the weekend, even though Venezuela were down for 10 men for a period of that game. Is there anything you saw there that would kind of turn you off, or are you kind of happy enough to kind of stay with Peru in this one?
No, I think Peru be kicking themselves, really. They haven't got 3 points on the board. I think they approached the game reasonably well for the first game of the tournament. I thought the performance was fairly decent too. You know, they were let down by poor finishing, really. They had 2 goals ruled out by a VAR, correctly for offside. But the combination of sort of last-ditch defending and some great goalkeeping really denied them. And you look at the raw stats, really, they had 12 shots in the box compared to Venezuela's 6. The expected goals count was 1.93 to 0.84. You know, if they can repeat that kind of performance here against Bolivia, I expect them to get the result. I can't really add too much to what Adam's already said. He's summed up superbly, really. You know, I think this game has been talked about as a must-win in some quarters, which I would say it's probably more of a must-not-lose match rather than a must-win game. You know, only 4 teams exit the competition after the group stage. So if you're still in a fighting chance to get 3 points from the board going into your last game, you're in a decent position. And I think, you know, as Adam says, Bolivia will take a very similar approach to this game. They need to get their striker Marcelo Moreno much more involved. He didn't even have a touch inside the Brazil box in the opening game. They only had 5 shots, 2 from inside the penalty area, and 26% of the ball as well. So they do need to show a bit more. But away from the altitude of La Paz, their capital city, they tend to be pretty poor performers. 9 defeats from 9 in World Cup qualifying away from home. And if you look at their competitive record outside of their capital since the 2010 World Cup qualification phase, 2 wins, 6 draws, 29 defeats. So I think this is all set up for Peru to get a victory. As I say, the must-not-lose factor rather than the must-win factor really for me puts me off a bet on the handicap now. Like Adam, I gobbled up a bit of a minus 0.75 at the weekend, but not too surprised to see that line shifting quite rapidly really coming into this game. So yeah, I do expect Peru to win this match.
Absolutely. Minus 0.75, currently down at about 1.23, gentlemen. So you got the values there. We'll move on to the next game. That's obviously not one to be playing at 1.23. We'll never advise as much. Brazil versus Venezuela. Obviously, Brazil off to a bit of a cracking start, 3-0 win over Bolivia. The hosts currently can back them at 1.16, even shorter than the previous handicap. 30.0 Venezuela, 9.6 to draw. Venezuela getting 2.25 goals start on the Asian handicap at 1.87, and the total is 3 and slightly favouring the over. Mark O'Hare, we didn't even talk about Brazil the last day. We were kind of confident that it would be a comfortable victory. Can we see another comfortable victory here?
Reasonably, I'd say. They obviously should win this game. I'm not sure I'll be that comfortable though. You know, that 3-0 result. If you look at half time, they were booed and jeered off by the Sao Paulo crowd, who are, you know, pretty. You know, they don't exactly take kind to poor performances. The first half wasn't that impressive. They did start on the right foot, but really lost their way thereafter. And you know, I think they were just a bit too cautious, really. I know Chichi talked about the World Cup exit to Belgium and potentially fielding a team, but was a little bit too open. And Artur is injured, so he brought in Fernandinho to play in midfield with Casemiro. You're playing Bolivia at home, you know, I'm not sure you need those 2 players. One of them is just fine. You could probably get away with either of them playing, to be honest. And up front, Bobby Firmino continued to struggle leading that line. He likes to drop deep, likes to link play. He was stepping on Coutinho's toes a little bit too much for me. Now, they did resolve things at half-time. Fernandinho played a lot more further forward, really, but I did think that the VAR decision to give them that penalty early in the second half really helped, because Brazil are at their best when they're ahead. They're given that extra freedom to exploit really some extra space. But bar Richarlison and David Neres, who from the flanks I thought were the best players in the team, I thought they were rather pedestrian and have been since the World Cup, really. The results don't say that. You know, 10 wins, 1 draw, 0 defeats, 9 clean sheets, but they've been quite uninspiring for me. I think they lack a bit of a leadership in possession. No one's really that keen to take the ball by the horns. So I think Artur coming back into the team, if he is fit to play, is going to be massive for them. But I wouldn't be too surprised to see Venezuela take a very similar approach to what Bolivia did here, aim to frustrate Brazil. They have a notoriously poor record against Brazil, 1 win in 24 historically, but they've improved dramatically as a nation, footballing-wise, this century. And there's a familiarity, there's a consistency about what they do under Rafael Dudamel. They didn't show it against Peru. Their goalkeeper Fernandez, who we talked about in the first video ahead of the first group game, was was excellent. Had a couple of dodgy spells, but they will relish this opportunity to try and cause a few problems. I think there is a couple of issues really for them. The left back Luis Margo is banned after the red card, and also preparation-wise, they've got a day's less rest from Brazil, and they've had to face the longest journey really between two games, Porto Alegre to Salvador, 4-hour flight. I don't think it's going to affect them too much. I think they're pretty well used and versed to travelling distances, but their results really since 2017 reasonably promising. Just 4 defeats, 10 draws, 5 wins. 4 of those victories actually came in the last 9 games. They've only actually been behind once in the last 17 games, which is a stat which to me stands out really, because if they can get to half time with the game goalless or on parity with Brazil, they've got an opportunity there to really frustrate them. They do have ability to get forward and cause problems, particularly with Rondon. But ultimately, I do expect Brazil to win. 30 wins from 37 under Chichi, 2 defeats, only conceded 10 goals in 56 hours of action really. So, but if I was playing this game, I'd be looking to oppose Brazil on the handicap. I think Venezuela plus 2.25 on the Asian has got some legs there. Brazil have only scored more than 3 goals against El Salvador and Honduras since the start of 2018, and they've only won by 3 goals or more in 2 of the last 12 Copa America games. They were against Haiti and then Bolivia in that first game. And as I say, I don't think the score really reflected how good they potentially were in that first game. So I think there's opportunity here for Valencia to keep things reasonably tight, if not end up defeated.
All right, Venezuela plus 2.25. Adam, Chernoff, in agreement?
Yeah, not much I can really add on to that. Certainly the short rest, I think, factors in a little bit, just having to put together the game plan to go against Brazil tactically. That's going to be a little bit tricky. But like Mark said, this is the Farinha's coming out party. Really, it's his case to showcase his talents, which I believe are the best in South America for a keeper, to Europe to get that big contract, the big stage for him against Peru. As we saw in the stands, there weren't many people there. There weren't many people watching the match on television either. This is going to be a little bit different against the big Brazilian crowd. Does he rise to the occasion or does he crumble? We'll see, but if anything suggests he's going to have a pretty big match here. So if you are bet with that handicap, usually a keeper can't keep you in the match, but this is certainly a case where that can be true. So I would be leaning the same way as well as Mark.
All right, strong vote of confidence for goalkeeper. I love it. That's where we're placing our angles there. Adam, I know you're very keen to talk about this one. Colombia against Qatar, 1.37. Colombia currently, Qatar 11.5, 5.0 to draw. The Asian handicap, Qatar getting a goal and a quarter start on the Asian handicap, and you can back that at 2.07, and the total 2.5. Adam, I suppose let's start with Qatar first of all. I mean, they made their entry last night, 2-0 down, battle back 2-all. You feel though that there's actually still some serious value on Colombia even after their win against Argentina in this spot?
Well, again, it's just looking at the headlines and playing the headlines. People were impressed with Qatar because they didn't get blown out against Paraguay. They said, wow, they made some clever passes. Oh, look at how crisp that formation was. They played a very basic sort of 4-1, 4-1, 4-4-1-1 type of mix. And for the most part, they were gifted everything in midfield, like I said, to open the podcast. The one thing that this team struggles with is size, and when they have a lot of space to run around in midfield, they have that time to sit back and make smart decisions. And they were able to work through a Paraguay team, which arguably the second worst in South America, and they put together a good last 25 minutes of the match where they were really gifted all the space. And now all of a sudden it's the surprise team that we're all looking for. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And now matching up against Colombia, I said that I wasn't really ready to say that Colombia is going to take that next step. And I still sort of agree with that to an extent. And it's not really working against the bet. But what I mean about that Argentina match is I think that the namesakes of Colombia and Argentina made that win a lot more impressive than it was. It became quite apparent that when you don't have a coach and you don't have really any tactics applied and you don't have a good player, a bunch of good players on the team like we've seen in years past, a win over Argentina really isn't as valuable as it would have been 4, 5, 6 years ago. So even though Colombia, I was really excited by what they showed us they could be at the end of the match. We saw Falcao go out. We saw what Zapata brings to the team. Very big on Duvan myself. But more so, I was really impressed with how Colombia played in midfield. Barrios eliminated Messi from the entire match. He had Medina helping out at the back. Colombia was really interested. They started 4 center backs, or 4 players who started as center backs to start their careers and got sort of shuffled out elsewhere. So I was really expecting it to be sort of this compact backside for Colombia, and they ended up playing super aggressive with their fullbacks, pushing them up the pitch. Really allowed space in the midfield for creativity. And we certainly saw that when Roger came on for the injured Muriel early in the match, about 15 minutes in. He added this new sort of speed to the attack that we haven't seen with Colombia in a very long time. So that opened it up. But there's so much size, especially in the center of the field for Colombia, and as well as a lot of pace for them to manage with too, that matches up just so good against Qatar's weakness. And if this finishing is there with Roger, if they bring in Duvan again, it's a lower sort of quality opponent. So maybe Falcao sees less time on the pitch, which certainly benefits Colombia. Queiroz might make that change a little bit earlier. He did a 75-minute mark. We might see it maybe around the 60-minute mark, or by some miracle, Duvan gets to come in the first half. That really opens things up for Colombia even more. But I think this is just a mismatch in midfield all day where Colombia can control the match. And we're certainly going to see more in the number of opportunities to score against the back line that let Paraguay, which was really Almiron by himself with a little bit of help from Cardoso running around them for any time that Paraguay was willing to push up the field. They got really whatever they wanted, missed a couple big opportunities. Colombia's got much more talent up front. I think that benefits them well here. The markets responded to this one a little bit, dropping it down. I maybe made a bad decision with the price I took at the handicap, but I still think this gets lower than that price at 1.74 by the time we hit kickoff. So we're going to see this market continue to come down in favor of Colombia over the next day.
It's kind of interesting you talk about the public narrative of supporting the markets. I mean, after beating Argentina 2-0, you would have suspected that a whole lot of public money would have wanted to follow Colombia here, Adam.
Yeah, and it certainly did. And this price got down. It was around 1.6. And then, again, the 2-2 performance against Paraguay brought it right back for Qatar. And if we remember back to that match against Paraguay, that one closed for Qatar. It was down as low as 1.65 for Paraguay. Paraguay closed right around evens. So, I mean, there was significant money coming in on Qatar in the first match. And that 2-2 performance where they needed those 2 goals late, which I was really not that impressed with, was enough to bring this back against Colombia, who went off 2-0 against Argentina. I don't really agree with that either, but I think that this eventually corrects itself and we see Colombia money the next day.
What are your thoughts here, Marco, here?
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting one, actually. I'm not as negative on Qatar as Adam is. I think the game was quite enjoyable against Paraguay. I think they deserve credit for the effort, the application, the way they went about their business, the way they didn't really shudder after going 2 goals down. They continued to try and play their own game. There is that consistency, a cohesive unit that they've got in place under Felix Sanchez, and I think that told really at the end compared to what is a completely new look Paraguay team. I'm not sure they'll have the same advantage here against Colombia. Obviously, Carlos Queiroz, he's only been in the job since last year, but he's a very canny operator. I think we saw that in that first game against Argentina. Qatar, their penultimate pre-tournament friendly came against Brazil. They lost that game 2-0. They only had 1 shot on target in that game, which I guess is probably telling evidence for how this game might play out, really. Colombia I was really impressed with against Argentina in aspects I didn't expect to be. I think Queiroz packed the midfield, brought Juan Cuadrado in, tucking inside quite a lot as well, which, as Adam says, allowed Barrios to keep a watchful eye on Lionel Messi. It worked really, really well. After half-time, Argentina tried to play a little bit more advanced and just played into Colombia's hands, really. They're so good on the counter-attack, and I guess the 2 goals came from their only 2 shots on target, but they only had 5 shots inside the penalty area. I know they've got plenty of attacking potential in this team, but I was more impressed with how they felt, or how they set up, really, both defensively and midfield and in the transition as well. But they're in good form, 6 wins from 7 since October, 4 clean sheets and 5 under Carlos Queiroz. 13 of the last 17 wins have come alongside a clean sheet as well. So I expect them to keep things very tight here again. I don't expect them to go out all guns blazing, trying to dismantle this Qatari team. They've got the big game out of the way, really. So it's just a case of doing what's enough now before the knockout stages. But for all the positives really about Qatar, they hit the woodwork, generated a couple of decent opportunities. They did actually lose their shots in the box count 8-5 against Paraguay, and the XG count quite significantly too. I know the penalty for Paraguay would have massaged those figures a little bit too, but I don't think Qatar are going to get the same change out of Colombia. So if I had to have a bet on this, it would be -1.25. But I'd be lying if I said I was overly keen.
Obviously, with the -1.25, if they do win by 1, you get half your stake. Mark, let's talk about Argentina and Paraguay, and we open up talking about Argentina here. 1.48 currently on the match odds. Paraguay can be backed at 8.8. 4.55 is the draw. Paraguay getting the same start here, 1.25 goal start as Qatar at 1.84, and the total 2.5. Mark, I suppose, look, I didn't actually see the game, and I suppose you're looking at the scoreline, and look, Argentina were still warm favourites to win that, and they were expected to win. Is there any possibility that, the likes of Messi and a couple of other stars, if things don't get going here in the first half against Paraguay, they could mentally check out?
Yeah, it's always a possibility, especially with South American teams. They're not known for their cool-headedness, but I do want them on side in this game. I think Scaloni, the head coach, the caretaker coach, his lack of senior management experience was probably exposed a little bit by Queiroz in that first game. But I did feel Argentina played okay for large parts. I know the press back home in Argentina were scathing with their criticism, but I thought, especially in that second half, they looked the more likely, really. Messi had a good opportunity. I know it wasn't a clear-cut opportunity, but for large parts, it was pretty a 50-50 game. It was only in those second half moments where Colombia took their opportunities when they had them, or presented them, and I don't think they presented Argentina with anywhere near enough clear-cut opportunities. But I do expect them to put their foot down in this game. They're unbeaten in 24 Copa meetings against Paraguay, and it's pretty much a must-win game for them now. They lost their first game. They can't really afford to probably just take 1 point going into that last game against Qatar. They did win the shots in the box count against Colombia, forced 6 saves in that game. As I say, not admittedly, great opportunities, but they won the XG count as well. And if Messi's given a bit more opportunity, a bit more freedom from his team, there's still this team built playing for him rather than with him. As I said before the first video, if they start playing a little bit more cohesively, I think there's definitely an opportunity for them to get a decent result here. Paraguay, obviously, in the infancy under their current coach, Berizzo. Osorio, the coach before him, only left in February. So they're really trying to build something ahead of the World Cup qualifiers next year. They do look like a team, still struggling to find their ideology. They often relish that role as underdog, playing a direct, unfashionable approach with players packed behind the ball. It's going to take time to change that system, especially in defence, where Berizzo is looking to try and push that defence a little bit further forward. They've not got a huge amount of pace in defence either, so I think there's a fair bit of a sort of uncomfortableness around this Paraguay team, if you like to say. And Osorio, the coach who came in before Berizzo, he kind of favoured training camps with his team rather than friendlies. So they've only played 5 friendlies since World Cup qualifying, and then this first game against Qatar. So they haven't had a huge amount of time to show what they're capable of. Results-wise, since May 2016, 17 defeats, 4 draws and 6 wins. I don't really hold out too much hope for them here. I can't say I'm rushing to back Argentina -1 on the Asian handicap, but I do think it's probably the best bet for this game.
Yeah, of course, you can back that currently at 1.77. So if Argentina do win by 1, you get a void, you get a push. Where are you on this one, Adam Chernoff?
Yeah, no disagreements there, and I'll harp on it for the 3rd time. I think it's super concerning what we saw in the opening match. Berizzo fundamentally is a high-pressing style of player. He's a high-pressing style of coach, and he wasn't able to impose that will or that style on his team and get them to perform at that sort of style and play. And so seeing that in the first match and how Paraguay was willing to sit back and really be traditional in how this team plays and just sort of send these long balls up for Almiron and Cardozo, like that's really concerning, that a head coach coming in and in his first match, he isn't able to get his team to rally around him and play to that style, then ultimately concede those 2 late goals is super concerning. I think that Argentina, like I was saying, it's the Copa America. It's not the World Cup where the first loss and you set up for the second match, it's really a do or die. There's all this pressure. You can get in with the 3rd place win. 3 points can often be enough. They got an easy match coming up. They can certainly win this one. Much better talent out throughout the pitch, but they can also sort of benefit from their lack of spacing and their lack of tactics that are applied to this team and just win this match on talent alone. I think Paraguay, if they were willing to sit back against Qatar, they're certainly going to be willing to sit back against Argentina, and that really plays into them. You're not going to have that threat of the counter like Colombia posed on them. I think it's going to allow them to be a little bit more comfortable, and it really simplifies the match for Scaloni and this team altogether. So I certainly think we see a different Argentina team. I don't think that panic is there yet. They can still get through with a win here and then a draw, or even if something happens here and there's another freak result, they can still get through winning their next match as well. So really not time to panic yet. I think they can sort of take a deep breath. As long as their spacing in midfield is better, they really struggled. They were playing over top of each other. It was ugly to watch. It was really, really bad. But if they can sort that out on a couple of days' notice, then they should be just fine against this Paraguay team.
Yeah, and you make a good point there regards to the dynamic of the group in stages in the Copa America as opposed to the World Cup. We will go to Uruguay and Japan next. Uruguay team that both of you quite fancy in the outright prior to the tournament. 1.19 currently, Oscar Tabarez side are. Japan is 17.5. The draw is 7.3. Uruguay are a 2-goal favourite on the Asian handicap. Flat 2 there. And you can back that odds against 2.03, and the total is 3. Adam, I will stay with you for this one. Hard not to be impressed by that Uruguayan win over Ecuador.
Well, they didn't even sweat. Like, defensively, Godin just kind of stood around and did whatever he wanted. He was never tested. The whole back line looked absolutely concrete. Midfield, they've got like this youth infusion of players going that's really interesting to see with Uruguay, who's traditionally sort of had those long-standing names, and now we get a couple new faces, some pace, some creativity, and it really sets up well. Like Suarez, for the most part, played sort of off the ball secondary to Cavani. Like, he wasn't even tested. He got his 1 goal. He had his opportunity, got a shot or two, but like, it wasn't the main focus on him just because this team has so much to offer. So that was really fun to watch. I certainly think that there's more to come from this team that we haven't seen yet. You look at who they had on the bench, they've got a lot of depth that hasn't come into play yet. So really think that this team is going to be extremely good. That against Ecuador, I mean, we can touch on them in a second. I'll beat them down pretty badly. We beat them down pretty bad in the first video. But yeah, very, very bullish on Uruguay going forward. This price is pretty big, though.
Mark O'Hare, I presume you're in kind of full agreement there with Uruguay. I mean, you look at this Japanese team, and obviously we flagged it beforehand that it's essentially an under-20 side. And has the market kind of adjusted enough here? I mean, two seems right, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Probably just about right. I mean, we'll talk about the Japan-Chile game that took place on Monday night. Japan losing that game 4-0. The result was a little bit harsh, so I'm not sure if that's been factored into the price itself. But you know, Japan created opportunities in that game, didn't take them. Only actually lost the shot count 15-12. It was 10-9 in the shots in the box as well. But ultimately, they paid the price for being too disjointed. You know, they're a new team. What was quite bizarre really is the Japanese coach bizarrely, you know, selected the majority of players in his pre-tournament friendlies which weren't involved in the Copa America squad. So you really are, you know, seeing this team for the very first time. They had 6 debutants playing against Chile, as we talked about before the start of the tournament. Only 6 players arrived at the Copa America with caps. 18 players aged 22 or under in Brazil. So it's very, very hard to get a good read on Japan. I thought they were okay in parts against Chile, but yeah, I think this game is all about Uruguay. Really, they didn't even have to get out of second gear to you know, spot Ecuador aside with plenty of ease. You know, 3-0 at halftime. That scoreline didn't flatter them at all. They could have kept their foot on the throttle thereafter. Decided to kind of, you know, just wind it in a little bit, but they still won the shot count 16-2. The XG regenerated well over 2 as well. You know, if they can repeat that level of performance, I fully expect them to justify the -1 3/4 Asian handicap, which for me is one of the best bets of the round. All the elements we talked about before the tournament came to the fore. You know, their experience, their unity, this tried and trusted system, all their sort of positives are all the negatives compared to Japan. So, you know, it's got to be a massive tick in the box for Uruguay. 12 wins from their last 17 games now too. They have lost Vecino to injury, but Torreira and Valverde didn't even start in that first game. So it's not like they're short on replacements in midfield. So yeah, a big tick in the box for Uruguay here.
Adam, in terms of attacking this from a wagering perspective, I presume you're going to like the -1.75, -1 3/4, and that's actually at 1.75. Or would you kind of be brave enough to go up odds against there and just take the flat 2?
Yeah, I think if you're going to look at the handicap, go ahead and take the 2. I don't know how you would measure something like this, but if you're looking at terms of experience between 2 teams competing in a major tournament, I would have to assume that this is historically among the biggest gap between experience in Uruguay and then the youth and inexperience in Japan. And you add in the travel to different location. Uruguay was one of the few teams in the opening round that actually had supporters in the stands. This tournament's been beat up pretty badly for lack of attendance just because the ticket pricing is so horrendous. But with just such a short travel distance over, they actually had a pretty good contingency in the crowd supporting them. So that went a little bit further in helping them get to 4-0 on that scoreline. Against Japan, although they had those chances, they generated some opportunities against a much stronger back line here of Uruguay. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to get that spacing again in midfield. I think they're just going to get chewed up. So it's another game where Uruguay can certainly control it for the full 90 minutes. If you're looking at laying 1.75, just go ahead and lay it at 2 and save yourself a bit on the price. It's going to get to the same result, most likely either way, with a 3-0 win.
Marco here, you're obviously minus 1.75. We know this from the main football podcast during the season. It's all about the number with you rather than the price.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm more than happy to take my minus 1.75. I guess it's my conservative attitude, but it's the second game. They've already got 3 points on the board. If the game is 1-0 after an hour or so, they get a second goal in the last half hour. There is no real need to go all out looking for a third or a fourth. They might be keen to conserve their energy, go to game 3 and play from there. Okay,
we'll move on to the final game of match day 2, Ecuador against Chile. Current prices here, Ecuador 4.6, Chile at 1.87, the draw 3.58. Ecuador getting a half goal start here in the Asian handicap at 2.06. 2.25 is the total, slightly favouring the over. Marco here, I'll stay with you for this one. Chile, we obviously discussed Japan there, but they were exceptionally impressive there with a 4-0 win.
Yeah, sure. I think they deserve respect. They're very much... I think they're very much opposable if we go deeper in the tournament, but there's enormous pressure on this Chilean team to perform from back home. Their coach, Reynaldo Rueda, is under huge pressure as well to get results. Therefore, he's not been able to blood, and I know I haven't got too many youngsters that come into the first team squad, but he's not really been able to blood those youngsters because the pressure is on him to get results. So I do think they're good enough to win this game. There's a smidgen of odds on here. Uruguay are around 1.8 when we talk to beat Ecuador. Sorry, to beat Ecuador in that opening game. But you just wonder if there's been an overreaction to Chile beating Japan 4-0 and Uruguay beating Ecuador 4-0, because I don't think Chile were as good as the scoreline suggested, whereas Ecuador simply were worse than the scoreline suggested against Uruguay. We talked about their head coach, hating the Copa America, using it for this training exercise to get ready for next year. All those usual characteristics really came to the show. As the stereotypes of Ecuadorian football, the pace and power was there, but the game plan, the system, the idea just wasn't there. They were completely exposed. I know they had the early red card as well, but Gomez prefers a kind of simplified approach, quite a direct style, but he made a bit of a surprise of his own selection, really. He fielded a team. He normally fields Guerreiro in a back four, in a midfield shielding position in front of the back four, but he was dropped. They played an attacking midfielder, Angel Mina, instead, and it was very hard to sort of see what the reasoning was behind that. And then, after the red card happened, Mina was then sort of taken off after half an hour, and they're back to square one. So anything he tried didn't work. Their form away from home, they also play at altitude as well, usually in World Cup qualifying. Their competitive away record since 2015 is atrocious. If you exclude the games against Central American opposition since March 2017, they've lost 10, drawn 4, and won once. They've lost 7 of the last 10 against South American sides, or 6 from 6 if you just look at games against Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, and Chile too. So this Chilean team who, they probably are over the hill now, but as I say, they're opposable as we get deeper into the competition. I wouldn't expect them to run up a cricket score again. They've only won by more than 2 goals twice in 22 games. Only kept 5 clean sheets in 18. Really shouldn't have kept a clean sheet against Japan as well, but they are scoring goals. They've scored in 10 of the last 12. They're the more experienced units. They're pretty much tried and trusted here, so I'm happy to take a chance on them at smither of odds on here, but I think goals could also be a worthy shout here too. But Chile all the way.
Strong selection there from Marco here, 1.87 Chile. Adam Chernoff, you were exceptionally hot on Chile, no pun intended, in match day 1. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't suppose that either of you follow Colombian soccer Twitter, Colombian football Twitter. My apologies, late at night.
Well, I guarantee you Marco here probably does, because he's literally the biggest football nerd you will ever meet. But anyway.
That's very true. That's very true. But Hernan Gomez, El Bolillo, was trending in Colombia. He was absolutely taking a pummeling, as Ecuador was taking a pummeling as well. Sort of the main issue here that everyone's having with them, myself included, is you can't play like Panama when you're not coaching Panama any longer. And that's exactly what it came through with Ecuador. In the opening video, I was talking about how he's a really good motivator, but he's one of the worst tactical coaches that you'll ever find on the planet. And his lack of any tactical planning was quite evident against Uruguay. The red card didn't go very long in helping him, but that one was about as ugly as it can get. And he left Bolaños and Quintero off the squad. And that really left a lot of questions about who he's going to go with up front. And like Mark mentioned, there was some bizarre concerns made there, but he has a way of making players who come in very good form look very poor. And we saw that with Panama as well. And now we're seeing it again here with Ecuador. Mena had one of the best seasons ever in Mexico in terms of production up front. And then he's just non-existent on the squad and gets subbed out. So certainly problematic, but as is problematic, his comments coming into the tournament where he said he doesn't want to win. He's more worried about the World Cup. So that sort of mindset carried through in that opener against Uruguay. I think Chile, on the other hand, it was probably the sloppiest 4-0 victory of all time in an international tournament. There were a lot of interesting plays, to say the least. They were really sort of, they can get in this like way of playing where they're always playing behind the main striker up front, and they're doing step overs and sort of dummy crosses and everything like that. And they had a bit of that flair, but their lack of competitive matches recently was really shown in a lot of cases where there were times where really if Japan could have a little bit of finishing success, that they could have put this away. Chile coming into the tournament was one of the sort of big five teams: Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Uruguay, Chile. Chile was one of the big five that I was keen to oppose at some time. This is not going to be the match where I oppose them, but it's interesting to see that the market has gone against them. There was market support for Ecuador in the first match. I have no idea why. That support's coming back in this match as well. I can see a little bit of the reason, and Mark sort of mentioned the overreaction factor. I think that that's here to some extent within the market, but really not sure why this price is moving the way it is. Not a price that I would want to get involved with at Chile in this match, but I'll stick on the sidelines and wait for a better opportunity, perhaps in the knockout stages, to oppose Chile.
All right, sounds good. Before I get you guys out of here, or let you get out of here, give me your best bet for match day 2. Mark O'Hare, I will start with you. I'm thinking it's Uruguay.
Yeah, Uruguay -1 3/4, really. I rate that at the same level. I'd take Chile as well, but just noticed that the goal line for the Chile-Ecuador game is 2.25, which seems a little bit shy to me. But yeah, I think the best opportunities for me this round are certainly in Group C.
Okay, we will be getting involved there. Adam Chernoff.
Yeah, mine's Peru, but I think that price is gone for a lot of people. If you did read the Matchbook Insights article, you probably got ahead of that market quite well. Down the way, the rest of the way, Colombia, that price is still available, and I'd be with Mark in backing Uruguay as well against Japan.
Okay, a lot of good stuff there. Thanks for taking the time, gents. Very much appreciated. And thank you for watching and joining us. We'll be back for match day 3 towards the weekend. We have no Mark O'Hare, though. Mark O'Hare, where are you going on Friday?
I'm at Royal Ascot, so...
Have you got the top hat?
Beautiful.
Not yet.
Okay, top hat for Adam. I'll probably see you Friday afternoon, hopefully, and we'll be back, of course, next week to talk about the knockout stages. If you haven't got a Matchbook account and you would like to get involved, we do have a £10 risk-free bet as a welcome offer, so you can check that out at offer.matchbook.com, and do remember to gamble responsibly at all times. Thanks for watching. Best of luck with your Copa America bets for match day 2.